Welcome to today's explainer. Have you ever had that feeling where the hair on the back of your neck just stands up in the dead of night? Well, today we're unpacking the anatomy of what is arguably one of South America's absolute most terrifying urban legends, El Silbon. So let me ask you a question. What would you do if you heard this chilling, almost melodic whistle cutting right through the heavy rain in the dead of night, and suddenly realized a 19-foot giant was actively hunting you? I mean, it sounds like an absolute nightmare, right? But for communities out in the rural farmlands of South America, this is a very real, very paralyzing fear. Section 1. The Storm and the Whistle. Damaso's Terror. Okay, let's dive into this. Our story kicks off in the 1980s. We've got a young man named Damaso, and he's visiting his uncle's rural farm. Now, by day, Los Llanos is this picture-perfect scene of serene, green, peaceful farmland. You know the vibe. People finish their work, they eat early, and they sleep early. But on one particular stormy night, that peace is totally shattered. Damaso can't sleep, and he hears this frantic commotion coming from the nearby animal shelter. When he steps outside, the entire atmosphere has shifted into something dark, stormy, and just bone-chilling. The cattle are impossibly restless, and he assumes they're just terrified of the approaching storm. But as Damaso is struggling to move these panicked cows indoors, one by one, he notices something is horribly wrong. There's this thick, nauseating smell of rotting meat just hanging in the heavy, wet air. And then, he finds it. Right there in the mud, amidst the dwindling herd, are the blood-soaked, freshly stripped bones of an old cow. Damaso literally freezes. The threat isn't outside. It's already in the shelter with him. And before his brain can even process this gruesome scene, a sound cuts completely through the pouring rain. Phew! It's a long, bone-chilling whistle echoing from miles away. And no, that wasn't the wind. For anyone who grew up around the local lore, that specific whistle is a literal death sentence. It is the ultimate signal of impending doom. Section 2. Legend of the Bone Sack, a childhood story. Now, to understand why Damaso is completely paralyzed with fear right now, we really need to look at the stories whispered around his childhood campfires. The folklore lays out a very specific hunting pattern. It usually goes like this. A horse rider is traveling late at night, and out of nowhere, his horse slips on the bloody bones of a deer left right in the pass. As the rider tries to recover, that same terrifying whistle echoes in the dark. And before he can even think about escaping, this towering figure strikes him with a massive bone. The next morning, villagers find absolutely nothing left of the rider, except a perfectly stripped skeleton. Which brings us to the entity itself, El Silbon, which literally translates to the Whistler. He's known as a cursed giant entity who carries around a bloody sack of human bones, and he mercilessly hunts anyone wandering the farms at night. So standing there in the storm, Damaso realizes with terrifying absolute certainty the creature from those childhood campfire stories. It's not a myth. He is outside, and he is whistling. Section 3. The 19-foot giant. The nightmare is real. Let's snap back to the terrifying reality outside that animal shelter. Damaso is standing there completely frozen when the lightning flashes and this impossibly long shadow stretches across the muddy ground. 19 feet. That is the sheer, unbelievable scale of the monster stepping into the light. We're talking about an imposing, inescapable physical threat that's roughly as tall as a two-story building. And this brilliantly illustrates the horrific details of the monster standing before our protagonist. El Silbon wears a tattered traditional straw hat, but underneath that, it is pure nightmare fuel. He looks basically skeletal, like the literal personification of death, with rotting flesh just hanging loose from his giant frame. And slung over his back is his trademark, a huge blood-dripping sack filled to the brim with the bones of his previous victims. Suddenly, a massive shadow completely engulfs Damaso. The towering 19-foot monstrosity locks eyes with him, lunges forward, and extends its horribly long, decaying hands directly toward Damaso, getting ready to just rip him apart. As the giant moves, this sickening sound fills the air. It's the heavy, wet clashing of that blood-soaked bone sack rattling on his back. With every single step El Silbon takes, the bones of his victims grind together, basically serving as a rhythmic, terrifying soundtrack to Damaso's impending death as he turns and runs for his absolute life. But come on, you can't exactly outrun a 19-foot giant, right?
The trees above him violently rustle. Damaso looks up in absolute horror and sees El Silbon practically flying, terrifyingly leaping from treetop to treetop with this unnatural agility, tracking him from above. In seconds, the monster drops down, completely cornering Damaso.
Death is imminent, Damaso screams. But then, a sharp, sudden sound pierces the rain. A dog barks. And in an instant, this invincible 19-foot giant actually convulses in absolute terror. The creature violently recoils and just vanishes into thin air. Damaso opens his eyes to find his own pet dog standing furiously in the mud. Yep, you heard that right. An invincible 19-foot demon was just chased off by a standard farm dog. His loyal pet, drawn by his screams, had miraculously saved his life.
Section 4. The Gruesome Origin Story, 18th Century Terror.
Now, you might be wondering, why on earth would a demonic giant be terrified of a simple farm dog? Well, to understand that, we have to look back at how this creature was created in the first place. It all starts in the 18th century with this highly spoiled, entitled boy who throws a fit and demands deer meat for dinner. So his father goes hunting but fails to find any deer. When the dad returns empty-handed, the boy flies into a literal psychopathic rage, murders his own father with a hunting knife, and butchers the body. The boy then actually takes his father's organs and meat back to his mother to cook. As she's preparing the meal, she obviously becomes highly suspicious of this strange meat and alerts the boy's grandfather. The grandfather interrogates the boy and discovers the horrific, unthinkable truth of what his grandson has just done. The grandfather's retaliation is swift and incredibly brutal. He ties the boy to a tree and whips him mercilessly with a hunter's whip until the boy's flesh literally hangs loose from his body, which, if you remember, is the exact visual we see on the monster today. He then vigorously rubs chili and alcohol into the open, bleeding wounds. Finally, he forces the boy to carry a heavy sack filled with his murdered father's bones, and he sets vicious, rabid dogs upon him, chasing him out into the wild and cursing him to wander the earth forever.
Section 5. The Ultimate Survival Rule, Breaking the Curse.
So the crucial point is understanding how this horrific folklore directly influences modern behavior in these regions today. It basically acts as a set of survival instructions. The legend leaves us with two absolutely vital steps. Step 1. Never wander the rural farms alone late at night because El Silbon is always out there hunting. But more importantly, Step 2. Always keep a loyal dog by your side. Because of the grandfather's agonizing punishment, the spirit of El Silbon is eternally terrified of hounds. They are literally the only thing that can break his curse and drive him away. And honestly, this is exactly why almost every single household in that region keeps dogs on their property to this very day. Which leaves us with one final, deeply unsettling thought to wrap up our explainer today. If you ever find yourself out in the remote countryside and the wind dies down and you hear a long, melodic whistle cutting through the dark, will your dog be there to save you? Thanks so much for joining me today. Stay safe out there and